Hi, I'm Brian E. Denton, author of the book A Year of War and Peace and the poetry collection Inspiration. Welcome to my channel. This video is part of a series I'm doing on Dante's Divine Comedy. I'm reading through the entire epic poem, all three books, Inferno, Purgatorio, and Paradiso, at a rate of 3 cantos or chapters per week. I'm doing this as an independent contribution to Baylor University's 100 Days of Dante Project, where they also are reading through the entire Divine Comedy at a rate of 3 cantos per week. I think it's a great project, and I invite all of you to take part in it. If this is your first time visiting the channel, welcome, and I'd ask that you please consider subscribing to the channel and also liking this video. I've set myself the goal of getting to 150 subscribers by the end of September, and I think it's a totally attainable objective if I can get your help, so thanks in advance for that. So each video in this series is going to consist of 3 parts. We're going to have this introduction, and then we're going to have part 2 will be a synopsis where I'll go over the main themes, the characters, and the plot. And then in the third section, I'll conclude with my takeaways, which is basically my analysis of the canto under consideration. So with that, let's get right into it. Dante's Inferno, Canto VIII. We start with Dante the poet getting his Tarantino on by engaging in a little bit of intertemporal, nonlinear storytelling. Remember that at the end of the last canto, Dante the Pilgrim and Virgil had just arrived at a tower. What happens in the opening stanza of today's canto, however, is that Dante the poet takes us way back before Dante the Pilgrim and Virgil approach that tower. They see from afar that there are 2 lights on this tower, and these 2 lights are in communication with another light. So Dante the Pilgrim, he asks Virgil, what's up? What's going on with these lights? And why are they communicating with each other? Virgil tells him to look closer, and soon he'll find out what they're communicating anyway. And indeed, this is true. For as soon as Virgil says this, a skiff appears in the distance, rapidly approaching them. And there's a single helmsman to this skiff, and he approaches aggressively, and he essentially just screams at Dante the Pilgrim that he's been caught. And he refers to Dante the Pilgrim as a damned soul. This helmsman is Phlegyas, another beastly creature of hell, whose name I can't pronounce. Virgil once again has to calm things down and inform Phlegyas that this journey of theirs is sanctioned from on high and that he must let them pass. And once again, Virgil is persuasive. All of them board onto Phlegyas' boat, and it's interesting to note here that the boat only displaces water when Dante the Pilgrim gets into it. So as Phlegyas and his 2 fares glide upon the water, a mysterious cloaked muddy figure rises up from the muck and demands to know who this living soul is who is with them. Dante the Pilgrim gets a little incensed at this question, and he responds to this person, listen, I'm not staying here, so you don't need to worry about it, and also who the hell are you to be asking these things? The figure responds that he is one who weeps, and Dante responds essentially, well then keep crying, because I know who you are, you and all your filth. At this, the figure gets extremely upset, and he tries to jump into the boat and grab at Dante, but Virgil backs him back down. And Dante the Pilgrim really wants to get into this fight too. He tells Virgil that he wants to push this person down into the mud like the swine that he is. Virgil tells Dante that he'll shortly get his chance to see this man ruined. And in fact he does, because shortly after that, a whole bunch of other figures emerge from the mud and they start tearing this guy to pieces and submerging him under the muck. And they also start shouting his name, Filippo Argenti. And then the 3 men in a boat continue on to the 6th circle of hell. This is the city of Dis. And Dante the Pilgrim draws everyone's attention to a bunch of glowing red mosques that dot the landscape. Then, when the boat pulls up to this city, a whole swarm of angels, and these are the rebellious angels of Satan's rebellion against God, they start swarming the boat, and they're very angry, and they start demanding, who is this living soul who dares, who presumes to come to the city of Dis? Virgil, as a dead soul, is invited to explain the situation. And here, for the first time, Virgil encounters some pushback. The rebellious angels tell him that only he can pass, that this living soul, Dante, shall not be allowed to enter the city of Dis. Naturally, this disturbs Dante, who tells Virgil that he cannot survive out here alone without him. Virgil comforts him and says, listen, our journey is sanctioned from on high, so just let me talk to these guys for a little bit. So Virgil goes off to talk to the angels alone, but to no avail. For shortly after that, the angels slam shut the iron gates to the city of Dis. Virgil curses the angels. And then he promises Dante that he will prevail in getting him entrance into the city of Dis. And that is where we end Canto VIII. So the character I'm sure that we all want to get to know is this guy Filippo Argenti. And as it turns out, Filippo Argenti is based on a real man who lived in Florence at the time of Dante. And this man's name was Filippo Adimare de Caviccioli. To understand why this man appears in such a sorry state in today's chapter, you'll have to recall Canto VI. And if you recall Canto VI, you'll remember this character of Ciacco. And Ciacco was talking about two rival Florentine political parties. These were the white Guelphs and the black Guelphs. These were the two rival political parties in Florence at the time. We won't get into the weeds of medieval Florentine policy and politics, but suffice it to say that these two political parties were even more polarized than today's Republicans and Democrats. We will, however, say that Dante was a white Guelph and Filippo Argenti was a black Guelph. So these two probably hated each other. And in fact, we see this reflected in the insults that they hurl at each other in Canto VIII today. The interesting thing about these stanzas where these two are exchanging insults is that they're loosely based on the poetic form of Tenzoni. Think of Tenzoni as the medieval Florentine analog to freestyle rap battling. So what Dante and Filippo here are doing is they're engaging in a rap battle. Now just think for a moment how awesome that would have been to witness Dante, one of the greatest poets of all time, engaging in a rap battle. That's got to be right up there with being able to watch Beethoven improvising the piano. One last thing about this Filippo Argenti guy. It's said that once the black Guelphs exiled the white Guelphs, including Dante himself, that Filippo's brother actually stole all of Dante's possessions. That must have stung. But who's laughing now? The first takeaway from Canto VIII, and probably the most important, is that upon entering the city of Dis, or in this case at least attempting to, we're now entering a new region of hell, a deeper region, a much more darker region, a region where the sins are much more harder than the sins that we encountered in the previous cantos of this poem. This hardness is reflected in line 78 of the poem, where the gates to the city of Dis are described of being composed of iron. So the hardness of the sins are reflected in the hardness of the gates. And here, in distinguishing between the severities of the different types of sins punished previously and those punished in the city of Dis, we get a little bit more of the theology of Dante. The previous sins, you'll remember, were those sins where the sinners lost themselves to their sins. In other words, the emotions and their passions, they just carried them away and carried away their reason. Their sin was, in a sense, mindless, and therefore, perhaps, they're a little bit less culpable in their sinful behavior. As examples, just recall Francesca and Paolo and Ciacco. Francesca and her lover Paolo were carried away by their passions. Ciacco was carried away by his impulse to eat and his gluttony. Within the gates of the city of Dis, however, things are completely different. Here, the sinners knowingly and willfully commit their sin. They understand that what they are doing is sinful, and they do it anyway. They harden their hearts against God. They sin out of their own dispassionate will. The best way to think about the two types of sins here, the passionate and then the willful, is to consider the American criminal law, where you have manslaughter on the one hand and murder in the first degree on the other. These are both considered to be homicide, but there are distinctions in the law which make one less culpable than the other. This isn't a law course, so I'll keep it short and sweet. The basic difference between the two is that manslaughter carries no malice aforethought, where murder in the first degree does carry malice aforethought. So, for example, to be convicted of manslaughter, you'd have to commit a homicide wherein you were provoked to do it, and you had no time to think and to reason about the provocation. You just lashed out. This is similar to Dante's sins of passion, to losing one's reason to their passion. Murder in the first degree, however, is completely different. With murder in the first degree, you do have malice aforethought. And that is to say, essentially, that some time elapses between the initial provocation and your committing of that murder. You have time to reason between the two acts, the provocation and the murder. Or maybe even you're not even provoked, you just go out there and kill someone. That's also murder in the first degree. The distinction being that with murder in the first degree, you have time to think and reflect upon your actions, and you choose to commit the murder anyway. Dante seems to be doing something similar here with the sins of passion and the sins of willfulness. For Dante, it appears that the sins of passion are less culpable because the reason has been overwhelmed. Whereas with the sins of willfulness, these are worthy of a deeper, more severe punishment that we'll get to see when we enter the city of Dis. Spoiler alert, we're going to get there. In short, just to emphasize, the sins in the city of Dis are not born out of any impassioned impulse, but rather from a firm and deliberate choice. It's the nature of this sin that reserves them a spot in the deepest reaches of hell. Here I think we have more of Dante the theologian, and perhaps this is his artistic rendering of Romans chapter 2, verse 5. But after thy hardness and impenitent heart treasurest up unto thyself wrath against the day of wrath, and revelation of the righteous judgment of God. The second takeaway from Canto VIII is that here Virgil experiences some real pushback. This is the first time we get some real confrontation from the Hell Squad. What I'm talking about, of course, is the fallen angel's refusal to allow Dante entrance into the city of Dis. In fact, they slammed the door shut on these guys, and no one, not even Virgil at this point, can do anything about it. What are we to make of this? On one level, perhaps what we're seeing is a reinforcement of this idea of the sins of Dis being sins of hardened will. That is to say, these are supremely willful creatures we're dealing with, so they'll prove to be less of a pushover than any of the other creatures that we've met so far in the journey. On another level, and I really like this reading, is that maybe what's being communicated here is more support for this idea of epistemic humility, which we spoke about in our last video. There are some things which human beings simply cannot understand. In order to see what I mean by this, think about what Virgil represents in this poem. Interpretations differ, of course, but what I think Virgil at root represents in this poem is humanism, and in particular human reason. So here, Virgil as the avatar of reason is absolutely powerless against the will to evil found in the city of Dis. And how often in our own lives do we stand in baffled awe before the bleakness and evil that permeates the very fabric of our post-lapsarian human existence? Truly, is it that we're all just little Tony Sopranos suffering from food poisoning in our bed and contemplating the big nothing blackness? It can seem that way, for as the Romanian Tony Soprano Emil Cioran writes, if the world had had any meaning, it would have been revealed to us by now, and we would know it. How can I continue to believe that it will be disclosed in the future when it has not been made manifest yet? But the world has no meaning, irrational at its core. It is, moreover, infinite. Meaning is only conceivable in a finite world, where one can reach something, where there are limits to stop our regression, clear points of reference, where history moves toward a goal envisioned by the theory of progress. Infinity leads to nothing, for it is totally provisional. But again, maybe this view of the categorical awfulness of the human experience, best represented by the sins found in the city of Dis, and this is a pessimistic viewpoint that I often share, and it gets me in trouble with my more optimistic friends and family, but perhaps this is just the air of perspective, born from my own epistemic hubris and my feeble human understanding. Perhaps where Virgil fails, some other incomprehensibility succeeds. Man cannot measure the will of God, which derives from a center beyond the range of human categories. Our third takeaway from Canto VIII is to note that for the first time, temporarily at least, Virgil leaves Dante the Pilgrim alone. This is when Virgil goes off to consult with the rebellious angels, the bouncers of the city of Dis. Perhaps this indicates Virgil's confidence that Dante is finally starting to acclimate to the region of hell, and that he's able to stand on his own two legs. Recall that earlier in the journey, Dante the Pilgrim is a complete mess. His emotional response to the sufferings of hell are just too much. He weeps a lot, he passes out a lot, and he must rely on all times on Virgil to help guide him through. Perhaps things are changing. Perhaps Dante the Pilgrim is getting stronger, and he's building up his confidence. And he'll need to start moving forward on his own anyway. This is important, for as Virgil says elsewhere about the need to develop courage, but never bow to suffering. Go and face it, all the bolder, wherever fortune clears the way. Your path to safety will open first from where you least expect it. All right, that concludes my thoughts on Canto VIII of Dante's Inferno. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks so much for joining me, and if you did like it, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. I've set the goal of getting to 150 subscribers by the end of September. As of this recording, I think I have 137 subscribers, so we're almost there. With your help, I think we can get up to 150 subscribers by the end of September. If you're a first-time viewer, first I'd like to say welcome, thank you, and I'd also like to encourage your participation in the reading. To that end, I'd like to leave everyone with a few questions to discuss down in the comments. For me, this is much more important than getting likes and subscriptions. The conversation so far has been great. I'm really enjoying what I'm reading down there in the comments, so thank you very much for leaving such intelligent and insightful commentary. Here are my questions. Number 1, what do you make of Dante and Virgil's inability to get into the city of Dis in this canto? Number 2, what about Dante the Pilgrim? Do you think he's getting better and stronger and able to stand on his own 2 feet? If so, why? If not, why not? Finally, we've made it to the city of Dis, which is a kind of turning point in the poem. So take this opportunity to let me know what you think about the poem so far and what you're anticipating to come in the future. All right, aside from leaving comments down below, you can also contact me on Twitter at Brian E. Denton. And remember that we're posting these videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So the next video is set to come out next Monday. Until then, take care of yourselves and others. All right, aside from leading...